My name is Rick Firestone.
My name is Benjamin Bugale.
And you're listening to pixelprojectradio. We are a video game podcast where we play through our favorite games, your favorite games, and then we talk about our experiences. We analyze them, we dissect them, we make jokes about them that are usually bad jokes, but sometimes they're pretty good. And all in all, I think we're having a good time.
Yeah, we boil them, mash them, mix them in a stew. These are the things that we do with our games.
Wise words from Samwise Gamgee.
Potatoes.
That's one of those early internet videos that is cemented in my brain and I will never forget.
And you shouldn't. I mean, it will haunt you. It will follow you the rest of your days, lest you forget.
Oh, is that what was going on in this game?
I think so. I'm not sure. What game did we play, Rick?
We are concluding our spooky October with Amnesia: The Dark Descent.
That's right. And that is descent as in descending, not descent as in, high descent.
Yeah, this is a game that was released in 2010 for PC and was re-released subsequently on different platforms. It is developed, or was developed, by Frictional Games. And, in my opinion, it's probably one of the best horror games ever made.
Yeah, it was. I can see why it's so important in the canon of horror and or scary games. It's kind of got it all going on here, and it was quite enjoyable to play. Yes, thank you to Frictional Games for making a game so, I don't know, it really kind of checks all of the boxes in a lot of ways for what makes a really good scary game. And back in 2010.
Yeah, and I will admit, I had tried to play this game twice before, and both times I was like, this is too much for me. Like, I put it down. I just played it through for the first time for this show.
Nice. Well, I'm glad that you did. I had tried to play it once, probably 6 years ago, and then probably got distracted, and then started to play it a year ago, and just kind of, I don't know. I didn't really have the time to play it, and so this gave me a really good excuse to sit down, take it out to dinner, etc.
Yeah, for sure. And even during this playthrough, I found myself having to take frequent breaks, or, this isn't something that I could sit down and play for 3 hours at a time,
Unfortunately, I had to, so that did happen.
Before we dive into the game, we wanted to do some quick housekeeping stuff. We're winding down to the end of the year. We've been doing some changes behind the scenes, reworking how stuff is going. And since, we want to continue into 2022 strong, we wanted to figure out how we're going to do that and then let you all know. Keep you in the know, because if you're not in the know, then you're not going to know,
We want them to be in the yes and the no.
Yeah, a real roundabout, if you catch my drift. So let's first talk about, if you're hearing this on release, which will be on Halloween 2021, then you're probably a little too late to jump into the horror poll that we've been doing. It's down to the final two, the two big baddies, Silent Hill 2 and PT, that's playable trailer, I believe, or playable teaser. One of those will win, and one of those will get a guaranteed spot on our 2022 lineup.
Absolutely, and it's been great fun, everybody. I appreciate you participating. We went from 33 different games, and we pared it all the way down to these final two. And you heard me right a while back whenever I said that we're deciding the scariest game of all time. That's what we're doing on our podcast. So to that end, help us this year if you can hear this through the ether, and help us next year because we will decide the scariest game of all time again next year. Can you believe it? It's going to be fantastic.
Yes, and it's completely objective. And speaking of objective, this is going to be the only time in the episode that I do this. How you bunch of fools voted out Amnesia in the first round. Get out of here. What are you doing?
See, now here's the thing. After playing it, and I'm not trying to show my hand early, I need to play some other games, and I'll get into this, but there's an element to Amnesia that just doesn't scare me enough. And that's something that so I'm not saying that it didn't deserve to go further, because in a lot of ways, I think it did. But it also, I mean, it had, that first round was unbelievable, because the game that you and we're just going to disclose our feelings now because we're already past this point. But the games that you and I thought would actually win that round was Resident Evil Village, and it got the least amount of votes.
Well, I had thought that Amnesia would go the whole way, and it got voted out immediately. So it was like, okay. But I agree. I thought RE8 would go pretty far, if for no other reason than it being a good game and recency bias. But yeah, as you said, voted out handily.
It was the strangest of times. But we've had a lot of great games that you have all suggested, and so we're grateful to you for your participation on our Instagram page, and we hope that you'll continue to participate in whatever we throw your way in the future, which we will be bringing this back. Full disclosure, 2022, scariest game of all time.
Definitely. And we'll have hopefully more participation then. The second thing that we wanted to talk about super quick is just a reminder that we do have a Discord that's going to be in the show notes for all of our episodes and is also in our Instagram bio. It is a link that never expires, so you can click it whenever you want. And you can come and hang out. And as long as you're cool and don't give us any reason to boot you, then you can stay and hang out. And it's been a fun time.
Please be nice. We want to be nice to you, and we want you to be nice to everybody else. And those are pretty much our standards. So if you're unable to be nice, why not? You know? just saying. Why the heck not? Do you want to do a quick review of what's coming up in November and then what else is coming up?
Yes. Let's review November and announce December real quick.
So November, we have a topic game, and we're going to be talking a topic game. Listen to me. We're going to have a topic episode, and it's going to be on puzzles in video games, and we'll get more into that because it sounds broad, but you're just going to have to stick around and listen to that episode to figure out what we're talking about. But we're also going to be covering Superliminal and Diddy Kong Racing, and that is your month of November. Rick, I am volleying to you for December.
So December is going to be just a little bit different. What we're doing is we're starting with a game. We're starting with the game The Unfinished Swan. That'll be what we start off with. And then the next episode, we're only doing 2 episodes in December. The next episode that comes out will be a sort of Q&A, an AMA, I guess I should say. We'll put those out in due time. And then we'll also just sort of look back on the year. We only started in April 1st, or I guess March 31st technically, plus a little recording before then. But we'll do a little retrospective, and we'll think about what we've done well, what we hope to improve, sort of how we might change up our flow and general vibe and schedule in the upcoming years. It'll be good fun. And while that episode will release, as usual, on the 20th, we're going to do it live, we think. We're going to record it live.
Yes, we will. And the entire time, we are going to play a game that you won't have any awareness of. And depending on what your comments are to us, we will have a number of condiments in front of us and just squirt them all over our foreheads.
We never said it was a video game, if you catch what I'm throwing.
So, let's just say that you find out what the buzzword is, like the word of the day on Pee-wee's Playhouse. We just pick up a bottle of ketchup and just bam, right on the forehead.
And we'll announce this again on Instagram, but we'll probably do it on Instagram as an Instagram Live. I don't know if those have a time limit, do you?
They better not.
Yeah, or we'll send a strongly worded letter to Instagram, or I guess now it's Meta since Facebook did that rebranding.
Yeah. Wait, really?
Yeah, they rebranded to Meta. Don't you hate that? I hate that.
That's not very meta of them, is it?
I don't question the Zuck anymore. He's gonna do Zuck things.
He's gonna do whatever he wants, and he's gonna get on his spaceship, and he's gonna go back to his lizard people. It's fine.
But that's November, and that's December. We're going to be taking a break for the holiday season and to just sort of decompress and be with our respective families and friends, which does include each other, I hope.
Oh, it does. Oh, it does. It does.
And we're going to be taking a break from the release of that episode, which, will be the 20th, until the 20th of January. So no episode in the beginning of January. We're still going to be taking it easy. because everybody deserves breaks to, as Ben so sagely says all the time, be human beings and not human doings. And then coming into the 20th of January, we'll be back strong.
We will be. We're going to do some squats and some deadlifts and so many curls and many planks, and we'll come back strong. Just you watch.
My glutes will be huge.
My ass. I can't. I'm out.
Is there anything else that we're going to talk about? Have I forgotten anything?
I don't think so. I'm looking here at everything. No, I don't have anything else. What I do have next is our patented one-sentence reviews.
Oh, yes. Yes, getting into the game that we're talking about today. Do you want to lead us off?
I would be happy to do so. So, Amnesia: The Dark Descent. Chock full of task-based puzzles, wonderful exploration, and plenty of scares, Amnesia is a clear paragon of the horror game genre. Set in the hard world-built Brennenburg Castle, this game is enhanced by its limits and first-person perspective, but plagued by repetitious frights and an ending that doesn't quite feel final. 7.7 out of 10, perhaps an 8.5 simply because it plays so well, but it just didn't scare me, and that has to be considered in rating horror games.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. And it'll be interesting to hear what ending you got, too, because there are 3 of them that you can get.
Mm-hmm.
So here's mine. Amnesia is everything a horror game should be. There's no shortage of atmosphere, and the player is never left without questioning whether they can trust their environment or even themselves. This, for me, is a 10 out of 10. Like, this is such a standard of what horror games should be, and it, a lot of people feel the same way. And that's not as a sort of way to slap your review, Ben. It's just Amnesia has influenced quite a lot of games, especially some of the bigger ones that have come out. Like Outlast is one that jumps out at me as this having been a pretty big influence on.
Oh, and I'm not saying it's not a remarkable game, because at first I was kind of starting to swell upwards into the 9s, and I just thought 8.5 at highest for me. And whenever I look at other people's, like, Metacritic and Game Informer and IGN and everybody else, it kind of is floating between the 8.5 up to 9.2 range, which that didn't actually influence me. I had come up with 8.5 beforehand, but on a scariness level, it did a lot of things right. And I can empathize with the way it scared people, which is why I have the swell margin in there. But for me personally, it's not a broken game, so it clears that 100% for me. And I rate games based on a number of things. But no, I mean, it's a good game, and it could have scared me a little bit more and done a couple things just a little bit differently. But I don't think a 10 is unjustified.
No, and neither is an 8 or even a high 7. Most critics that have reviewed this game do fall somewhere within that, somewhere between an 8 and a 10, or a high 7 and a 10. So obviously very well reviewed. It did come out and deliver a couple of sequels. Amnesia: A Machine for Pigs, that is the direct sequel, and then a third game in the series titled Amnesia Rebirth, which released, I think, just this past October in 2020.
I believe it did, yes.
There's also a DLC that was like a promotional event for, I think, Portal 2 called Amnesia Justine that ties in with Amnesia 1, The Dark Descent. This episode will be strictly on Amnesia: The Dark Descent and not any of the sequels or DLC. So we sort of alluded to the reception. Did you want to volley it, Ben, into any of how the game works, such as graphics or mechanics?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. First of all, in terms of mechanics, did you use mouse and keyboard, or did you use controller?
I used mouse and keyboard.
See, and I used controller. So I'll just talk about what you can generally do, not necessarily what the buttons do, because they're going to vary between the two of us. So controls, you're able to do all sorts of things, like you can jump, you can crouch, you can pick up and throw objects, and just place them down. For goodness sake, it's okay. You can run, and I appreciate that the run didn't have a sprint that expired, because sometimes that frustrates me, because it's like, don't get me wrong, like, you should have a limit, but like, they make people seem like they can't run for anything in a lot of games, and that drives me nuts.
It's one of those mechanics that aims to be realistic, but this game does that in so many other ways that it's nice that they, acknowledge this is a video game. We're going to throw you a bone. You can sprint forever. Usain Bolt, get out of there.
They nailed it. They nailed it to that end. And then there are, and I really appreciated this, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, there are basically 3 hub buttons. There are 3 places that you can land. One of them, well, I guess there's another mechanic, but I'll get to it. There's the start button, which is a start button. You can save and quit. You can look at options. You can adjust things, whatever, sure. There's sort of a select screen, which goes to the items that you have on you, which we can get into. And then there is a button that provides us with notes, diaries, mementos, etc. And I loved that. And I'm curious to know what your thoughts were, because the mementos I just thought were extremely, I thought they were well done.
Yeah, there's a lot of lore and backstory to this game. So having a dedicated hub for the notes, the diaries, and the mementos is important because while this game is scary just on its face, knowing the lore is part of, and the story is part of what makes this game so rife for investment. And a lot of the story deals with these sort of Lovecraftian beyond understanding type of things, as well as some like weird science and ancient relics that makes it exciting and makes it more terrifying in a lot of places. So it is good and recommended to collect as many of these as you can, because they're not all mandatory, and get as much of the story as you can as you're going through.
It's some really grade A hard world building. If you're a fan of like Lord of the Rings level world building, then you're going to enjoy this game, because it doesn't, as much as it leaves to the imagination, it absolutely does not. It gives you every beat. There's not really much to guess about in terms of the story. Lovecraftian is a great way of putting it. The authors apparently also were inspired by Carl Zimmer, who wrote horror movies like The Haunting and Soul Made Flesh. So, it's good. I love that. And I love the fact that the mementos, if you're feeling stuck, they can help you out. They kind of tell you what you're looking for. And to that end, the game allows it to be as hard as you want it to be. And at the same time, it can take an edge off if you need it. And I loved that.
Yeah, the diaries and the notes, well, more so the notes than the diaries too, will give you hints on how to progress, like hints for dissolving the organic tissue with acid, or, how to get a particular key out of a pipe that is not something I would think of if I hadn't have found that note. Let's just say that. But yeah, hard agree. It's great. You had mentioned, Ben, another hub that shows your inventory. What it also shows you, in addition to your inventory, are your health and sanity meters, which are 2 of the game's biggest verbs. And they are represented, respectively, by a heart and a brain.
Yes, they are. And depending on how beat up you get, the heart kind of looks a little bit weathered.
Yeah, really weathered. It looks great. I mean, it doesn't look great. It looks horrible. But, it's great that it looks horrible,
It's graphic, and it's good to that end. The brain kind of, they just kind of shrivel it a little bit or make it a little bit, kind of more plump depending, and then they shine different colored lights on it, and that determines your sanity. And that works,
Yeah, and these aren't meters like you would see in a fighting game, for example. They progress through stages. So I don't remember the heart one, the health, quite as much, because this, as we'll talk about, is not a combat-heavy game. But the sanity meter progresses when you start. It says all clear or something like that, like all is well, all clear. Progresses to things like a slight headache, everything is pounding, and then at the very worst, it just has 3 dots, which is just such a good representation of your sanity depleting as you're going through this game.
Yeah, I admired that, and I admired what they would do also. Like if your sanity was too far gone and there'd be like insects crawling on the screen. I don't know if you ever got to that point.
Yeah. So how these work is health works as you'd expect. If you take a fall, if you get attacked, then you're going to lose health. Sanity works with more complexity. So if you were in the dark for too long, your sanity is going to go down. If you see paranormal activity, your sanity is going to go down. If you see monsters and look at them for too long, your sanity will go down. So all of these contributing factors are constantly making you fight between safety and sanity. Because if you're in the light, you're going to stay sane, but monsters can see you. If you're in the dark, they can't see you, but your sanity's depleting. Things like that. And that's at the core, that's one of the biggest reasons that I think this game is so good and does things so well, is it's constantly making the player bargain. Like you're never going to be at a point in this game where you have an influx of inventory or you're just so maxed out in terms of consumables that you can take these risks. It never gets like that. You're always bargaining, where do I want to place the light sources? When can I use my lantern? You're never quote unquote good in this game. You know what I mean?
I do, and that's something that I really liked about it as well. I liked it, but one of the things, I wish there was a little bit more of a consequence whenever you don't, like if you didn't help your sanity enough. Like for me, like I think that the insects were a nice touch. I don't know. But at the same time, I loved it because if you're out of a certain item that helps you see better, we'll just call it a tinderbox or a lantern oil or something. Whenever you're out of those sorts of things and you can't see when you're walking around, I like that it would impair your sanity. But I like that you could still function. I don't know. I generally liked this. I liked it a lot.
The consequence that I saw as you're losing your sanity, and another thing about this that I really liked, is your screen starts to become shimmering is not the right word.
It warps.
It warps. And the less sanity you have, the more it's going to warp. And also, the less sanity you have, the more prone to seeing some of these monsters, whether real or apparitions, you will be. So that's sort of the trade-off that I found is, it's just obscuring and obfuscating your vision, and it's also playing tricks on you to your detriment. So it's like the farther down your sanity goes, the harder it becomes to maintain that sanity. There's not really any mechanics to talk about in terms of health. You've either got health or you don't, and you can use, what's the item?
Laudanum,
that's it. You can use that to refill your health, but if you're low on health, your screen kind of does that slight reddening with a heartbeat. But other than that, you're not going to face any other adverse mechanics.
Yeah. So Rick mentioned laudanum, which is an item, which we have items in this game. I mentioned tinderboxes, and we've got laudanum. And then there's a lantern, which is another one of our buttons in the controls and mechanics conversation. The lantern is great when it's great, and when it's not, hold on to your hats. You can also collect lantern oil to power the lantern. And then there's a number of other items that you can mix and match, and I really liked that as a mechanic as well.
Yeah, and those mix and match items often are story dependent, so we'll touch on those as they come up. Your lantern by far is your most important item that you find, because it gives you a portable light source. And as we mentioned, when you're in the light, although you're marginally less safe, you are more sane. So if there are times where you will want to extinguish that lantern, but you can always resummon it, and it'll auto light as you resummon it if you have the oil by pressing a button.
So those are the main items, and I'd say the main mechanics. What would you like to talk about next, Rick?
The only other thing that I was thinking about in terms of the sanity meter is it's pretty similar to the one in Nintendo's game Eternal Darkness. And knowing Nintendo, I'm not sure how this slid under their radar.
For them to go after someone for using it?
Yeah, you would think. I mean, Amnesia is a really successful franchise, and the sanity meter is pretty darn similar. And, Nintendo, they're not shy about that kind of thing.
No, they like to hold fast to what they have created. I'm sure they would have lost that fight, though. You know what I mean? Because, the stamina bar, right, in sprinting and running games like that, I don't know who used it first, but now it's universally just kind of everyone's, and so I'm guessing that they probably didn't go to bat for that. and just were like, sanity, who needs it?
So outside of that, that's pretty much all of the mechanics you're going to run into. This game plays heavily on hiding and running from combat, or I should say hiding and running from antagonistic forces. There is no combat. It's explicitly stated right out at the beginning that you can't fight these monsters. You don't stand a chance. And the game also mentions in the beginning on one of the loading screens, quote, "Do not play to win. Immerse yourself in the world around you." This is a game that you can easily beat in 3 hours, and speedrunners have done it in under an hour if you really know what you're doing.
Wow.
But the point of it is to sort of just live in the environment. And that's a lot of how you're going to progress throughout the game, right? Is you're going to need to interact with the environment, use objects to break down other objects, place them as a means of traversal, things like that. So it's a very atmospheric. If you're looking for a game where you fight or shoot stuff, this isn't it. This is much more of a slow burn. It's much more of you, the player, are always helpless. What are you going to do next? It's one of those. And personally, I love that.
Same. I really enjoyed that aspect of this game. It was immersive, and you said atmosphere in your review, and I can't help but agree with you. I think atmospherically it was pretty gosh darn perfect. And again, for 2010, what they were doing was just beautiful. Say, Rick, we've covered mechanics, and we've talked a little bit about development and all that stuff. Do you want some bend by the numbers here for a second, pal?
Yeah. Why don't you hit us with some of that?
So as we talked about, it was in existence in 2010, and apparently they were worried about how the game would do. They were worried about, okay, is this game going to sell? But it stayed very consistent. It wasn't one of those ones that just kind of blew up and then shrunk into nothingness. And it certainly didn't do one of those things where it was nothing and then it exploded and then it shrunk again. The sales of this game were pretty well paced. And by the beginning of January 2011, they had sold nearly 200,000 units of this game, and it kept gaining and gaining and gaining until by July it was at 350,000 units. I mean, it just kind of took off, and this was astounding for its time. And after a year after, they'd reached just about 400,000 units being sold, and we're continuing to sell 6,000 units a month. That's pretty impressive.
It is, and one of the cool things about this game is you can usually find it for pretty cheap. I want to say under $5, but I could be misremembering. Certainly not above 10. And it runs on just about anything. Like, you could run this on a laptop that does not have a dedicated graphics card.
Something else I'm reading here, which it won't matter because people are going to hear this after the fact. In 2015, Kotaku had ranked Amnesia as the second best horror game of all time, beaten only by PT. How about that? But apparently it moved to first place after PT was removed by Konami. So how about that?
It's a good one.
It is. It's a lot of horror games and scary games stand on the shoulders of this game. It did a lot of things right. And while it, relied on literature and film and whatnot that came beforehand, it still has its original story. Yeah, it's a good game. It's a good game.
Yeah, I mean, without it, we wouldn't have Outlast or Soma. And speaking of Soma is a successor. Well, not a successor in terms of sequel, but it's the next big game that this studio went on to make. And speaking of Soma, another point of praise that I would like to heap on this game is the sound design. It doesn't have so much of a dedicated score, although there is music in it, so much as it has just masterful sound design. And that plays into how you play the game. You always need to be listening because the more sound you make, specifically if you're in the water, which is one of my favorite parts of the game that I can't wait to talk about, the more vulnerable you are. The monsters are going to be making noises. The paranormal cues are going to be about, and you often hear things around you, like voices and footsteps. It's masterful, and it doesn't ever, or if it does, they're so rare that I don't recall them. It use those sort of cheap scare chords, like we heard in the Cat Lady, for example, that just kind of pop out of nowhere. It's very atmospheric and just so well done. I can't speak fondly enough about it. It was done by Mikko Tarmia, who is a Finnish video game composer, who also did the other Amnesia games, Soma, Penumbra, etc. So very well versed in the genre. Excellent job. I think the soundtrack is available for purchase.
I think
I'm not certain. It's like a half hour long, but super good. Really well done.
It is. It's sort of like an ASMR game. I mean, they could have, again, a lot of games stand on the shoulders of this game. You realize from how much you have to rely on your ears, you realize how much more has come because this game, how many games have run because this game, quote, crawled. And I don't say crawled in a diminutive way, but it set the precedent, it set a new standard, and I thought it was brilliant.
And just as we wrap up, thinking about things like sound and the overall immersion, I think that's one of the reasons, for me personally, I hold this game so dearly, but also why it's so successful is it's so immersive in the sense that, you can't fight these monsters. You're not some superhero with a gun, or you don't have these paranormal powers to talk to ghosts. You are very much at the mercy of your environment. You are hiding, you are running, you are being resourceful, and it all plays to this point of having this S-tier level of immersion that creates significant tension and significant terror. And I think that's why, games like The Cat Lady, for example, or another one that we did recently, At Dead of Night, why they didn't hit so strongly for me is because I just didn't feel that level of immersion. Whereas something like this, or Soma, although I've played very little of Soma, which we will hopefully get to on the show eventually. Given enough time, we'll get to it, but who knows? That's why those games to me stand out so strongly, is because, I was gonna say I feel like it's me in there, but realistically, I would die much sooner than Daniel does, or does he? Depending on the ending, we don't know. But do you know what I mean? I'm starting to ramble and get really off track, but it feels immersive enough that it doesn't seem outlandish to think this could be me. You know what I mean?
I kind of pick up on what you're putting down here, and they do a really good job of kind of swallowing you into the game. I mean, they even say this game is best enjoyed like in a dark room. Be careful of eye strain, everybody. And to that end, it really does, bathe you in a really strong environment. For me, I found some of the effects wearing off over time. Not that they weren't impressive, and not that I recognize that they didn't have everything that we have today in terms of what they can create, but it was, at least for me in the very beginning, extremely immersive. And it stayed pretty immersive. I just found myself less and less scared, which, to be honest, now leads me to, what would you give this on your spookometer out of 5?
Oh man, if there were a group of spooky, scary skeletons, they would be sending 4 out of 4 shivers down my spine.
See, for me, I would probably... We're only doing 1 to 5 and 0.5s, right?
I think we've been changing it every time, or at least I've been trying to.
Good, perfect. I would probably give this somewhere between 2 and 2.5 poisoned apples presented by the witch.
Out of 5?
Yeah.
Wow.
Let me explain. For me personally, for a scary game to get me, for a scary game to be truly scary, or like, the essence of horror, it has to disturb me to the point that I'm uncomfortable in my life. Like, it has to get to that point where, like, I start to kind of like look over my shoulder. And there are games that do that to me.
What are some examples of those?
So, to be honest, the first time I played the game I'm Scared. Have you ever played I'm Scared?
Yeah, back in high school.
It was a long time ago, right? First time I played that game, the fact that it had put files on my computer and I had to like look for them, that kind of stuff, like, and then the fact that there's like literally no music at all until you hear like this breath approach you from behind, like that kind of stuff gets me. Games that have, it was sort of like, I don't know how to explain it. But the other thing is, and we'll get to this in the story, is that I found myself perpetually apprehensive about, these monsters that were going around until they started to seem very, and I know you used the word repetitious earlier, but repetitious. I wanted a little bit more variety in how I was spooked by monsters. But I'm not saying that I need like giant spiders, because I'm not into that. But it didn't have as much of a physical effect on me as it could have had. And that's just it. It has to get through into my bones.
That's interesting that you didn't find this. So would you say this is like how would you rate this in tandem with games like I'm Scared or At Dead of Night in terms of how much they scared you?
So At Dead of Night was probably a little bit less, probably like a solid 2 or less. I'm Scared, if I think about it from where I was in my life at that time, pretty high. I'd probably put At Dead of Night, or not At Dead of Night, listen to me, I'm Scared at like a 4. I'm not going to lie, Slender the Arrival, the first time I'd actually gone through that game, the amount that it had, that was 2015, 2016, whenever I played it for the first time, that to me struck closer to a 4, 4.5. It was unsettling. Like there's imagery that makes me feel like when something is a little bit too close to real, that's when I start to like, you know what I mean? There's a threshold. It's hard to explain.
I would argue that Amnesia is a little closer to reality than Slender Man, to be honest with you.
It isn't not, but the world in which Slender Man exists is closer to real for me. Like the fact that there are monsters like that look the way that they do. I look at that and I mean, yes, they're scary and they approach me and like it gives me shivers every once in a while. And it did the first couple of times. But for me, there was a scene in Slender the Arrival. Spoilers, if you haven't played Slender the Arrival, skip ahead in this episode for about 30 seconds. But there's a scene where there's like a child standing in like a burnt down house and they're not facing you. And they're just like shivering in the corner and like you find them. And the first time I approached that child, I was like, I can't keep playing this game. Like I just stopped. I did not want to see that child's face.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I think the benefit to this episode is I think we kind of appreciate's maybe not the right word, but we sort of vibe with and search out different styles of horror, which kind of goes back to what we talked about in our previous episode, talking about the genre of horror and its DNA sort of sprawling and branching out into other genres and being more, than just spooks and scares. I think we approach and seek out different styles of that, which is going to, it's made the last 2 episodes, I think, good and exciting, but certainly this one too.
Yeah, I would agree.
Is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you wanted to mention before we dive into the story?
I don't have anything else, but I will say that Silent Hill 2 now has 4 votes and PT has 1. So
nice. We kind of peripherally touched on the graphics. I have that written down here. But the game uses its own engine, which is kind of neat. The graphics, I mean, they look good. They look of the time. They look above average for the time it was made. And that we touched on the sort of warping of your view as your sanity goes down. That's kind of an ever-present thing that's there because you're never really cloaked in light for that to completely go away. But yeah, and then we'll talk about the monsters as we come to them. I think we could save that.
I think, dear Richard, it's story time.
Yeah, let's get into it. So this game opens with our character Daniel. He's sort of reliving dreamlike patches of his memory. He's saying that he must not forget that a shadow is hunting him and he must stop someone. And we're getting these little vignettes of him walking through this castle. This game takes place in the mid 1800s in Prussia, and it takes place in the castle of Brennenburg, belonging to one Alexander Brennenburg. Alexander is going to be our, I was going to say main antagonist, but that kind of depends on your definition of antagonism. Alexander is a person of interest who we are seeking out. We don't know that right away, but he is going to be somebody important. And this is his castle. It looks very of the time. Would you say medieval is a good word? I know that's not the correct time period, but that's sort of what I thought. I don't think, is Gothic maybe the better word?
I think Brennenburg Castle was supposed to be built between 1300 and 1500.
Oh, so medieval would be the right word.
I believe so. Let me look it up because they have their own fandom wiki, and I think that this place was built many years earlier. So to that end, yeah, it's like I think a 500-year-old castle or so. It fits.
Cool. I'm never one that is confident in dates and history and things like that. So every time I open my mouth, I'm always like, is that right? But anywho's, the opening is you wandering around. You're following this pink trail of liquid. You're looking for its source. We should note at the beginning that throughout the entirety of the game, there are sort of scares that happen. Like doors will open, air will whoosh in, rustle papers, knock over chairs, extinguish your lantern, things like that. I think as a listener, just assume that these are sort of ever-present and peppered throughout. I don't think, unless there are ones that we particularly liked, we're probably not going to mention every one just because there's too many.
No, and that's just it. Like, there are a lot of, just consistently throughout the game, the wind blows, puts out candles, etc. Like, it just happens. It's part of the DNA of this game. Yeah, we're not going to mention every single thing that happens. But we are kind of hazily walking around the castle following the liquid trail. Shortly hereafter, we find a candle and a tinderbox on this table, and that kind of introduces us to the tinderbox, also known as probably the second most used item in the entire game. And we're trying to traverse our way and figure out what we're doing other than following the liquid trail. And I kind of liked how vague it was at the beginning. It was just like, follow the liquid trail. And I was like, okay, entrances have been blocked off by stones, and you really don't have many options, which I appreciate that at the beginning of a game. It's very linear, and I know we talk about tutorial a lot. This felt really clean to me. It wasn't cheesy or hokey or even that campy. It just was like, push this button for this, and then it got out of the way.
Yeah, one of the things that I have written in my notes a little bit later is I really like how sprawling this castle is, but the game is really good about never letting you get totally lost. There will always be areas that are blocked off, whether that means you will eventually get the tools to remove the blockage to get through, or the malevolent force does it for you. There was never really a time where I was genuinely thinking, I don't know where to go. It's pretty good about keeping you on track. And I appreciate that. I'm with you. I think this whole opening is really strong. One thing that I always am hesitant about in games is the notion of a character having amnesia, because it's one of those super convenient and overused plot devices that gives developers a reason to do info dumps. And I'm so thankful that, one, this didn't do that, and two, the story is strong enough to where the amnesia that Daniel has is so central to his character and the story. And it's played out across the entire game. It's just, I think it's really well done.
Absolutely. And how he develops his amnesic, I don't know if that's a word, episode, that also is quite original. And I agree. I think that trope has been used a lot. But how they induced it is more curious.
Yes, yeah. So you make your way down to the archives. You pick up your lantern, which is super important, and you find a note addressed to you from you I love shit like this, dude.
Yeah, I liked it too.
So what does this note say, Ben?
If I'm not mistaken, it's telling you that you have to kill Alexander, who is located in the inner sanctum. That's the big gist. I mean, like, we're going through, and like there are some occasional flashbacks as we'll get to in the game, but it's you talking with Alexander, and now the game's like, you have to kill Alexander, who's in the inner sanctum of the castle. And you're like, what? I don't have any weapons or anything. What am I supposed to do?
Yeah, and as I said, this note is written from you to you. So it's telling you to stay calm, and you tell yourself, I hope you remember after taking this drink. That gets expanded upon later. And like you said, Ben, it does tell you to kill Alexander. It doesn't explain why. It also mentions that a shadow is hunting you.
Yes,
You describe it as a living nightmare.
And the shadow is embodied by, if I might mention that now, is it a good time? The shadow is more or less embodied by this, it looks like a muscular system that kind of takes over portions of the castle. And I think it more or less seems to be the force that is slamming open doors and blowing wind. And we hear these roars that are just massive and shake the screen. I thought it was a great affect. That's the shadow that's following you. And the first time that I had the first couple of times the shadow made itself known, it gave me a good spook.
That's something when I first tried to play this game, like back in 2014 or so, I didn't appreciate. I thought the shadow were the grunts, the monsters that were following you. And now that I played it this time, it's much more subtle than that. The monster is this sort of, the game to some extent relies on the Lovecraftian trope of like undescribable horror. Like how Lovecraft always was like, it was so terrible I can't even describe it. And it's like good writing. That's a joke. I like Lovecraft.
I'll eat my hat is kind of one of those kind of,
But this force that is hunting you, the fact that you cannot visualize it and it sort of defies our senses and makes itself known how it decides to, that is scary to me. That is so scary.
Yes, I would agree. Yeah. So, eventually, we've picked up everything that we can in this room. I believe there are tinder boxes and other things that are just, because there are tinder boxes everywhere. Because it's a castle in the 1800s, and they don't have electricity yet, you silly head. This is the room where is this the bookshelves that help us get to the next room? Yeah. Thank you for nodding, Rick. There's kind of a puzzle, and I love this, I will say. It feels very Legend of Zelda dungeon to me, this entire Brennenburg Castle. And that's something I love, is that it doesn't throw you that many bones unless you need to use mementos. But you have to pull these books, and whenever you do so, there's a door that develops. A shelf moves, and there's a door that leads you into the entrance hall. And I like that. I like that it doesn't have things that are too sore thumb-ish.
I think I misunderstood you. I think that puzzle does come a little bit later. I think here there's just like a lever on the wall. I think there's just a lever on the wall that like moves a bookcase out of the way or moves the wall or something.
Yeah, no, that's the lever. You're right.
But we go in, as you said, though, we do go into the entrance, and we get our first audio flashback here, and we hear Daniel speaking to Alexander. They mention the refinery. It's currently blocked off by that organic tissue that Ben mentioned, that is the shadow, and it needs to be dissolved. This organic tissue is like pinkish red, and it looks like, infected tissue is kind of the best way I can describe it.
It's like a muscular system that just kind of vomited itself everywhere.
Yeah, and right now, if you touch it, it hurts you, so don't do that. But like we had alluded to earlier, the game is pretty good about keeping the sprawling castle contained insofar as where you need to go next. So, although you can do it, maybe you can do it in a slightly different order, I'm not sure, but the next place I went was the laboratory.
Yes, same.
So this lab is like decrepit. This is where you get a really good like red vision scare. The shadow often will mess with Daniel's perception, and the game will just kind of shake a little bit, and you hear the growling, and the vision turns red. We get one here, and it's really effective. This is also where we find our chemistry pot, which I don't know. It's just a funny term to me.
It's very funny.
But that's important. And we find 2 notes here. One mentions the compound to dissolve tissue, and the other mentions the ingredients to make that compound and says they might be in the wine cellar, but you need the key to get there first because it's locked. And since it's locked, the only next place we can go are the archives.
That's right. We go to the archives, which, to be honest, I might have gone to the archives first. I mean, there's so many options, which I like that you can do some things a little bit out of order in this game to this end. You can do some exploring, which is, to be honest, one of the things I think makes this game so good. There are signs that, they're all in Latin all over this building, all over this castle. Libra Rari, which is rare books. What else is there? I mean, it's extremely, I don't want to say professorial, but it's, I don't know. You can tell that this castle has been a sort of haven for minds and people who are, notable minds and what's the word I'm looking for? The intellectual type of the 1800s, the kind of spooky experimental type of people. But the archives are, of course, riddled with tinderboxes and other sorts of items. There are notes all over the place. There's a contract for a man named Wilhelm that Alexander had employed that we read about. And at first, this doesn't seem to be to mean too much. Yeah, the shadow continues to kind of mess with us in the archives. What was next in the archives, though? My brain is I'm having my own case of amnesia.
We find some of Daniel's diary.
Oh, that's right. And the thing is, whenever you are in Daniel's diary, we actually hear Daniel reading his own diary to us, which, let's talk about voice acting. I thought the voice acting in this game was very good.
Yeah, uniformly good, especially Daniel.
Yeah, I actually didn't look up to see who did the voices, but they were. Are you looking? Are you peeking?
I could do some scrolling. I don't know if I'll find it.
I was gonna say it's appropriately large for the fact that we don't have many face-to-face interactions with other characters. We're basically just reading and hearing things, and I think the level of drama that is brought to the voice acting really, really enhances the game. Personally.
Yeah, I agree, boss. Yeah, I can't find it.
That's okay. Whoever you are, good job.
Yeah, can you imagine if one of the folks who worked on Amnesia listened to this?
That's lovely to hear that somebody thought my voice acting was fine.
Are we assuming they're British?
Oh, well, if they aren't, then wow, those accents were incredible.
So this first entrance of the diary, entries of the diary, excuse me, we find much of Daniel's diary as we go along, so we're sort of always like a patchwork quilt piecing together Daniel's missing memories. In these first entries, we learn that Daniel was going to excavate a tomb in Africa with somebody named Professor Herbert. They go into the tomb, but Daniel gets sealed inside. He passes out in there after what he believes to be mere minutes and sees this mystic blue light, and it unlocks in him, quote, alien memories of spiraling towers, endless deserts, or as I wrote it, endless desserts. I guess nice. I was hungry.
Yummy.
And impossible not to get too off track too soon, I bought pistachio gelato for the first time. I'm not a big sweets person, but holy shit, man. Pistachio anything is good. Pistachio gelato?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God.
Oh, yeah.
But not endless desserts. Endless deserts and impossible geometry. So this more of this Lovecraftian language. And, when he comes to, after what he thinks to be a few minutes, he's pulled to safety and has pieces of a relic sort of broken in his hand. And those are going to become a fixture of this story.
Yes, the relic that you're holding in your hands was an orb. It was an orb that had ended up shattering into some pretty sizable shards. And yeah, I just... finishing the game late last night, I just want to talk about the orbs at length, but it's not time to do that yet. Yeah.
So this next is where we get that book puzzle, the bookshelf puzzle. Right. And it's, you mentioned it's Legend of Zelda-ish, and like it really is. It's so funny to me because this is the only time in the game that they make this so obvious. But in the flashback, Alexander is literally telling you how to do the puzzle to the point where he's like, well, if you pull the first one and you hear the sound cues and you don't get to the rest fast enough, you have to do it all over again. And it's just so weird because the rest of the game handles these puzzles well in terms of like prisoner diaries or notes that you find, but this one is just so on the nose.
Mm-hmm. He's literally telling you what you need to do.
But as you said before, Ben, you pull those 3 books on the 3 different sections of the shelf, and it opens a door. At this point, you hear a crash outside, but you can't really see anything just yet. But you do find a note in this room regarding the closing of the wine cellar and the key. Alexander is saying that the sheriff has been keeping close watch and that it's only a matter of time before they find him. The king's men are in the wine cellar, and he plans to seal them in there. He also, in this note, calls them human vessels. So this is the first instance, like, we are now learning Alexander, bad guy.
Not very nice. Yeah, he's holding them hostage more. I mean, he has kidnapped adult humans.
Yes, and all of this, again, like a patchwork quilt, will come together soon. We walk out of here, and we get our first sound cue in a very brief glimpse of our monsters for the first time. And there's also a jump scare. This game doesn't have tons of jump scares, but there's one where if you walk to the end of the hallway, boulders are blocking a door, and when you turn around, an apparition of the monster approaches you and disappears before it gets to you. Scared the living fuck out of me so much.
That's completely fair. What actually disturbed me was the first time I played this and I saw the monster that ran away. That's what scared me a lot. And then, they still scared me. But the apparition, yeah, that's fair. That's a fair scare.
Yeah, and do you want to talk about how these monsters look?
Yeah, so the monster, the one that leaves the room, we don't really get too much of a glimpse at. We just see like their back end leaving. The first monster that we have, let's just call it a more intimate relationship with, is basically split from like a portion of his head down through his midsection and has eyes that are like kind of, I don't want to say hanging off his face, but they're kind of warped on his face. At least this was the one that I saw the most. They're kind of naked and they have giant blades on them.
Oh, you saw that one first?
Yeah, that was the one that had plagued me the most. Yeah. And
okay.
Early on.
Yeah, so we should mention there are 2 different types of monsters. Grunts and something else. I don't quite remember what they're called.
I thought they were all grunts, but maybe they're not.
No, it's grunts and then another one. But the one that you described is the other one, whose name I can't remember. The grunts, they also look naked, have gray sort of melted flesh, and these ones, their jaws are dislocated and stretched down and to the side, so they're always constantly sort of gaping. They walk in a very unnatural manner. Just good. I think it's good design. They look very human, and we come to find out later there's a reason for this. It's because they are. But yeah, just they're not so supernatural enough that it makes me less scared. They're like, they retain just enough humanness to them to make it just kind of creepy and vile in a way that also makes me mildly disgusted, I
would agree. No, they are, I would say, it's just speaking for me, from my personal vantage point, extremely disturbing off the bat. Like, just, you look at them and the fact that they don't look too different from you is, well, at least you're assuming, right? It's its own unsettling nature when everyone's, charging at you for the first time.
So now that we have the key, we can go to the wine cellar. Inside, you get a flashback of the king's men. They don't know where Alexander went, but it's party time, baby. Like, they're just like, we've got all the wine that we could drink for the foreseeable future, or at least until tomorrow.
They're getting sauced.
They are getting absolutely sauced. And we learned that this was part of the plan. We get the cuprite here. We're still trying to, if you remember, we're trying to make that acid. We get the cuprite and the calamine here. But after you pick that calamine up, a barrel sort of falls onto you and knocks you out, I should say. And this is where the game sort of introduces the mechanic of you having to interact with the environment to progress. Right now, it's pretty simple. You just have to literally pick up rocks and beams that have fallen and move them. And that's how you progress. Then we get another flashback, again, audio flashback of the king's men dying in the wine cellar. This was pretty crazy to me. They keep saying they feel like their chests are going to burst.
Yes.
And we get a note. We find a note of Wilhelm's last words.
Mm-hmm.
Did you find that note?
I did. And he said that he exposed basically and confessed to being a kidnapper for hire. Yeah. And they all got locked in the wine cellar by Alexander. And they're all dying kind of strangely. So he basically, it was a confession.
If I may, the ending of the note reads as follows. So begins the punishment for our sins. The Baron has locked us up and returned upstairs. Forgive me for what I have done. I was weak and fell into his diabolic ways. My men are screaming. Their skin has been pierced by their own tangled bones. I feel my insides revolt against their God-given nature. Blood has begun to pour from my eyes, and I can no longer, and the note just ends there. So all of these people are just dying horrifically in here. And we don't know why just yet.
No, we do not. And if I'm not mistaken, this is where we have a monster show up down in this wine cellar, don't we, shortly hereafter?
We do, yeah, after you pick up the Aqua Regia, I think. I don't know if this is where the monsters can officially get you. But the way this game works, I have read, is that the monsters aren't always on the prowl. The game deploys them at specific times, at specific points.
Mm-hmm.
But they do it in such a way that it makes it feel like the monsters are always around. So, I never felt truly safe. But it introduces the mechanic, whether they can hunt you right now or not, that if they're around, you should extinguish your light and hide. But again, remember, being in the dark causes your sanity to go down because you don't like the dark. So it sets up this system of bargaining. You're always bargaining on whether you want to be safe or sane. And that never goes away. That's always throughout the game.
Mm-hmm. Have we made the drill yet?
We haven't made the drill yet. This is where we pick up the last bit of the chemicals for the acid, and we go back to the laboratory. But it should be noted, as we go to the laboratory to make that acid, there's even more organic tissue that's spawning in the hall. So the shadow... I've seen it theorized two different ways. I've seen it theorized that the shadow is trying to halt your progress because it's a malevolent force. And I've also read that it's the shadow kind of coaxing you along because in some ways you have the same goal, which plays into some of the different endings. But yeah, I've seen it said both ways. And because it's never explained, that's pretty cool.
That's a soft world build, and that's a good call. Isn't there, in the main hall, isn't there actually a body now and the fountain in the middle at this point?
That comes up in the next main hall. There are a couple different main halls. That comes into the next one.
Too many halls, 10 out of 10.
Too many halls, too many cooks.
Too many cooks.
But no, now that we've got our ingredients, we can use our chemistry pot to make that acid. We also get an audio flashback around here after we melt the tissue to get into the refinery. We get a little audio flashback of Alexander sort of refusing to tell Daniel why it's so dark, and just keep saying to him, just keep moving, keep moving, keep moving. And part of that is because the monster's here now, and he can get you. He can get you.
Yeah. Now, at this point, we're leaving the main laboratory to go up the stairs, but we find that the stairs are broken, if I'm not mistaken. That's where we're at, is it not? Yeah, so, and I loved this part of the game, is the fact that the wooden stairs are no more. So you have to use materials around you to make yourself a ramp to get out. And I rather liked this. I mean, I know they said there's a number of ways to do this, but that was, for me, I just made a ramp, a 2-leveled ramp. Is that what you did?
Yeah. Yep. We also, around here, I'm not sure exactly what room or like where we get this, but we get more of Daniel's diary. It's sort of him explaining after he gets back from his exposition. He's not sure if he imagined the whole thing. He can't put the pieces of the orb back together. And he says that they're like slightly changing their size and their shape and their color. And he starts to document it so he can prove it, and they are. And he still doesn't know why this is important, but he knows that it is.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you have I'm glad you have a finger on the pulse of the diaries, because those are the things that, like, as you read these to me, it's like, oh yeah, I forgot about that, and then it ends up being true, as we see later on in the game. But we won't get there just yet.
No, because just now we are descending a little further into the cellar archives, into one of my favorite parts of the game, I think.
That's the refinery, isn't it?
The cellar archives, I think, is right after the refinery, where you're in the waist deep water.
Oh yeah. No, this part, I can see why it's your favorite, but I'd rather hear you wax poetic about it.
Are you sure? I feel like I've been talking too much.
No, not at all. I'll just chime in for a second. I love the fact that this room is dark, but that it's not so painfully dark. And then there's just water everywhere that you have to... Yeah, this was a rush.
Yeah. This might be one of my favorite moments in horror games, period. And I'm not going to pretend like I am an aficionado with horror games. I haven't played probably not even as many as you've been. But the way that this is set up is just so fantastic to me. So you're in waist deep water. So obviously, as you're moving, you're creating splashes. But now the invisible shadow is hunting you, and it can hear where you're going. So as you're walking, you'll hear this sort of sloshing and walking behind you, and you'll be able to see the water scattering as if a monster was approaching you, but you can't see anything, and it will follow you. So this is another great example of the sound design being good. So what you have to do is you have to hop onto these boxes that are scattered and sort of play like the floor is lava, except instead of lava, it's water, and there's a carnivorous force that's trying to get you. But of course, it's not possible to stay out of the water completely, because sometimes you need to wade through it to progress. So you have to kind of keep an eye on where this thing is as it's hunting you. And, you have to close doors if it's coming after you, which it just breaks down because it's built different, I guess. You can also like find chunks of flesh, like arms and shit, and you can throw it.
Yes.
Which the monster will like take that as a diversion. And as it's eating that, like you can hear it devouring it. And that's when you can like run. Just, this is so well done to me. I love everything about this section so much, because partly because you can't see what's hunting you, but you can, without a doubt, prove that it's there because you can see it. You can see its effect on reality. Yes, and it eats. But also because you can't be safe, because there aren't enough crates for you to just hop around like the floor is lava. You have to go in the water sometimes. And that makes it all the more stressful, because when the monster hears you, it chases you, and you can hear that. Like you hear it charging behind you.
So I admit I mixed up the cellar archives with the archive tunnels. The archive tunnels was what gave me the real spook for me in this game. This was the moment where I was like, oh, scheisse.
What are the archive tunnels? Can you remind me?
It's right after we're done in the cellar archives, and I guess the only way to really describe entering this area was the music got extremely intense, and we just had to run for our lives. I jumped to get through the water because it was falling behind. It was like the shadow at this point, I believe.
Oh, yeah. This is the exact same as this previous area, but there are just no boxes.
Yep.
So you're just 100% vulnerable. And you just gotta you gotta move.
In the shadow, if I'm not mistaken, there's like roaring and stuff coming from behind you, and the screen is shaking. And the only way you're going to get through this, because you are in waist deep water, honestly, is to like just keep jumping. And Rick, I'm not going to lie, this for me was probably the scariest point in the game, because I just wasn't turning around. I was like, screw this. I'm just gonna move, and I'm gonna make it. I'm gonna be okay. And I would like peek around me, and I wouldn't see anything, but I'd see that the room was dark, and I was like, no, I'm just running for my life. So yeah, no, the archive tunnels were absolutely horrifying, and your salvation is a door that leads you to the back hall, and that's the hall I mixed it up with earlier. I love this part of the game. This as like, it's its own hub in the game. The back hall is just beautiful. It feels like a haven. There's light. There are windows. There's a fountain. I don't know. It's a good part of the game.
Yeah, this is the hall where that creepy fish baby statue is.
With legs.
Yeah, just bizarre and creepy in just such a good way.
Alexander likes what Alexander likes. That's what he said. No, he didn't say that. That's not it. I have dreamed of you, fish baby leg. Baby fish leg. Leg fish baby. I'm done. He's a weird
we
dude.
find more of yeah. We find more of Daniel's diary around here. One of the one of the folks that was joining Daniel on the expedition, his name is Herbert. Herbert was ravaged by a monster, and that's what he tells the authorities. So Daniel goes to get his remaining supplies the next day, and among them is an account of the trip by Herbert. And reading that, it says that they recovered Daniel in the tomb after an hour. Daniel has no idea how this can be true because he suffocated after just mere minutes. So as Herbert's account continues, his men are going mad from being in the tomb, so he just goes into the tomb to get the orb himself. And now Daniel's thinking, well, what do I have? And then the final part of Daniel's diary is he assembles the orb. The orb comes together strangely easily. He doesn't even need to use the tar as an adhesive.
Yeah, that was kind of suspicious. All of these notes, if I'm not mistaken, are all in the guest room off of the back hall. Yeah, so the orb comes together suspiciously easily. This is one of the things I loved about this game from a puzzle standpoint, is that we've picked up a crowbar at some point, and there's a door you can't open. And the fact that you literally just use your intuition, good intuition always scores a game higher for me. The fact that you have to use the crowbar to like bust open the door, chef's kiss. I mean, I know it's really simple, but come on, that's cool. It's real.
After we pick up that crowbar, you hear the monster approaching, and the game will periodically give you hints like this. For the door, it might say this door is locked and its lock is strong, or this can be removed but not with hands. When you hear the monster this time, the game hint simply reads, "You better hide. You can't defend yourself."
Yep.
So you hide in the dresser, and the monster just breaks the door down, and you can hear it in the room with you. But there's not like music that indicates the monster's gone or anything. You just have to wait and listen for it to leave. Which
liked it.
Yeah, just fantastic. But we pick up the machine room key, and now we can go back to the main hall.
Isn't it behind the picture frame?
I don't remember precisely.
It's behind a picture, which I love that. It's behind a picture in like a little glass jar. I couldn't find it for the life of me.
There's just so much, like, as I was exploring the castle, there are points where I'm just like, why is Alexander doing this? Like there's so much stuff hidden, or like every drawer I would open, there'd be white shirts just everywhere, and it's like, how many white shirts do you need, bro? Like,
Alexander only has the correct amount of white shirts, otherwise he is naked in fish leg baby fountain.
Well, for all of the goddamn white shirts that he has, when we find him at the end, he's naked with his dong hanging out, so he's sure not wearing any of his clothes.
That was a laugh. There is not an elephant in the room. Wow.
That laugh must have been loud enough because the audio cut out and I didn't hear anything.
So we'll get to Alexander and his in a little bit. Where do we go from the guest room? We go back to the back hall, at least.
Yeah, we go back to the back hall. The next thing that we need to do is figure out how to fix the elevator, which isn't it's not the very next place that we go, but it's the next part to advance the story, or as they call it, the ascending room, which they comment, this will take care of the vertical part of our journey. And I actually laughed out loud at that. I don't think it's supposed to be funny, but the whole premise being like Alexander's castle has technology that the rest of the world doesn't have, but it's not fantastical like ray guns or anything. It's like elevators. It's just funny. But there are a couple things that we learn on our way there. We learn that Alexander was also running experiments on animals. We find like taxidermied animals that have been messed with, drawings, notes. Basically, they're trying to extract vitae from humans, and they're realizing that animals don't have enough of that. So we know where that's going.
This is all in the study, right? Where we find all of these animal carcasses and taxidermy and whatnot?
I believe so, yeah. I'm not sure if this is in the study, Ben, but we also find an item of Alexander's that gives us this flashback that's just like black text on a white screen.
Yes,
and it's
yes.
like first person Alexander is sort of like journaling or like monologuing out loud. From this one specifically, we learn that there's somebody that he loves. He's doing this, whatever this is, for somebody that he loves, and we learn that he's at least a century old. I almost said a century years old.
That's right now.
So something's not right here.
No, it is not. I will say that, and I loved this part of the game, I will say, there's a broken window in the study. And we have to jump out of this window. And I did this before I learned that I needed the part. But we find this thing called a flow cycle rod. There's a note next to it, and it details how to actually fix and start up the elevator. But you have to jump from windowsill to windowsill, from one window to another. And I just did it instinctively to say, like, what can I explore? And then I found it. I loved that. I thought that was really cool. But after we do this, we keep looking for tinderboxes and oil, which are conveniently in some treasure chests, and I like that too. Hold the music, though, there, Koji Kondo. And we work our way back to the back hall again, this time with one of the parts, and thanks be to God, the instructions on how to get the elevator going.
Yeah. So is this where we go to the storage room?
Yes, it is. And this was pretty good. This got me a little bit.
Yeah, so we've also been looking for explosives to blast the rocks away so we could progress on. When you do that, you hear a woman's voice sort of crying and saying, "Why are you doing this?" And she's saying things like, "I won't tell anybody," and eventually we hear her getting killed. And I don't remember if we've mentioned this or not, but every time we've been going back to the back hall, there's been more organic tissue and or presence of the shadow. So now at this point, the fountain is filled with blood.
And a dead body.
Yep. Now there's a body in there with the creepy fish baby.
That's right.
But now we're going to the machine room because we've got that key. So we can go there. And we find, just to keep up with the diary, we find more diary entries. Daniel goes to a university to learn about the orbs. And he learns a little bit. He also reveals that Alexander offered to protect him, and that's why he got invited to the castle. Daniel doesn't really know why, but he accepts because he doesn't know what's going on. And we learn that Sir William Smith, Professor Taylor, and Dr. Tate, or Dr. Ted, they're all dead, and their heads are split down the middle. and their skins are sort of flayed. So Daniel doesn't know what's going on, and that's why he accepted Dr. Toot.
Sorry, please continue.
No, that's it. That's why he accepted Alexander's request, is because shit's getting weird and Daniel doesn't understand it.
And to be honest, what's happening is that Alexander, we don't recognize the nefarious nature of his work, but he's really more or less getting you to do, well, we'll get to that later. But yeah, I liked the machine room puzzles. How about you? What did you think?
They were fine. That's where you're stabilizing the pressure, like with the rods and stuff.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, they were fine. I liked them.
Yeah. Basically, just to summarize, we need to get the, elevator working again. Or what was it? What was its other name?
The ascending room.
Ah, the ascending room, which of course we're not ascending in, we are descending in.
Yeah.
That's the best part. But then again, to Alexander, maybe that is ascending. Ooh. Also, if they were to call it the descending room, I mean, it's kind of like whenever a movie like has the title in the text, like in like the last 20 minutes of it, it's like, oh, shut up. But
so
anyhow,
it's a little too on the nose.
Just yeah,
he was the Family Guy the whole time.
I knew it. That's exactly what I'm talking about, Rick. But we do get that. We get the elevator working. Thank goodness. I was looking for the monster the entire time. Did you have any monster interact with you down there?
I don't think so. Not here.
No, me neither. Thank goodness. So anyway, we go back to the back hall, and there's not really much to do here at this point. So we can work our way over to the elevator, pull the lever, and enjoy what you think is going to be a nice little ride. And then what happens?
Well, of course, the elevator crashes.
Of course it does.
So you're down in the bottom now. We get a little flashback. Alexander comments that he's also a prison warden, and he keeps prisoners here. And Daniel says, "This looks more like a dungeon." And Alexander is like, "Yeah, it's a prison." And it's like, okay, something's weird here. This whole thing is a maze, and you have to sort of manage the monster here too, because there's a monster here. So if the monster sees you, you have to sort of just sidestep him, hide in rooms, close doors, that sort of thing. So there's that level of anxiety playing throughout here. Down here, you also get a flashback involving two of the prisoners, a mother and a daughter. The daughter becomes important here a little bit later. Basically what happens is the mother sends the daughter through a hole in the floor to find somebody named Gabriel, and when Alexander questions her, she does not relent.
Right, and it's worth mentioning that we've been finding tools throughout the entirety of this game, but we end up finding a hammer and a chipper, which the mother and the daughter are in a cell together, and the mother, out of trying to hide the daughter, stuffs her down this hole to her escape, and we kind of relive in that flashback.
Yeah. So you're going down that hole after you widen it with the hammer and the chipper. So this is another maze area. So we're going through various prison cells. What we need to do is we need to melt the lock on the door to the cistern with acid. Throughout the prison cells, this isn't where we're finding notes of the prisoners, is it?
No, that's later. At least I thought it was later. I could be wrong.
I think you're right. You are right, because we get into the cistern after melting the lock, and this is like the sewer level. I mean, there is an actual sewer, but this whole place is kind of like sewer-esque.
I loved the cistern. Whenever you actually get into the cistern itself,
I don't know how I felt about it. I didn't love it, I think.
The big room. Yeah, see, I don't know. I like the ambiance of that because it kind of it's a big boy of a room, the cistern is. The light, I will say, is admittedly pretty refreshing. There's a pipe in the way of this ladder because there are rooms that we need to explore throughout the cistern because we try to go one way, but the water is too deep for us to even traverse. So we kind of rock a ladder up and down until it breaks this pipe and we can ascend. And that's whenever we make our way to the control room, if I'm not mistaken. One of the bridges in the cistern, there are two bridges. One of them will come down. It'll drop, a bridge for you to cross to get to other rooms. The other one is broken, and we need to figure out what to do.
Around this time, this is also the first time where Alexander sort of speaks to you directly. It's presented the same way as the audio flashbacks are, but it's in present tense. You hear him asking, Daniel, is that you? What are you doing?
That confused me at first because I was like, is this in my mind or is this real?
Yeah, because this entire time the shadow has been playing tricks on you. Sometimes the monsters are real, sometimes they're apparitions. And at first I thought this was just another part of the flashback, and it was just going to, expand upon it as I went forward. But no, Alexander is actually speaking to you. He's still here. I mean, the original mission is to kill him. So he is able to communicate telepathically with you.
Yes, he is. So we enter the control room, and you'll find that there are doors on either side of the hall. And if you look, one of them has weights in a very particular position, suspended from the ceiling. The whole premise of the control room is that you match the controls in all of the rooms down this hallway. After doing so, you've got all of the machines. You've got the cistern kind of functioning again because we're trying to get past the water. The water that we can't descend any further. So that's why we're in the control room trying to get everything to work. However, whenever we go to spin a wheel to get ourselves out, because there are these wheels that you have to twist to get the doors up, or else they'll close on their own. It's like a security system. There's a wooden crank that we plug into where the wheel used to be because, of course, it broke off in your hands. And I loved this. I loved the fact that it forced you to kind of MacGyver situations. Whenever we crank using the wooden crank, the door opens and we can leave. There are also pipes that we have to attach to the wall. There's a lot of stuff to do in the control room, but ultimately it makes our time traversing the cistern and the rest of the game much easier.
Yeah, I think maybe that's why I didn't love this section so much, is it was just a lot of backtracking, looking for different parts, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, I didn't like the control room. I just liked being in the cistern.
Okay, I get you. But yeah, Ben, as you mentioned, we've got to drain that water, and we do it via the methods you described. We affix pipes, we turn our cranks, we crank our hogs, and that will drain the water so we can get down into the morgue. Now, what we learned down here is that there is this fungus that is incredibly toxic and poisonous, and will die, if we inhale that fungus. So that's a problem. But we also learn that there is somebody down here who is deceased that was immune to this fungus, and in a note we learn that his blood, their blood is a vaccine. So we have to do this scene where we extract their blood and inject it into our own.
Yeah, I
don't think would work IRL. I think you would die if you just injected somebody else's blood into you.
I don't think it would work with the deceased person, but I don't know. If any of my mortician friends are listening, please help.
Do you have friends that are morticians?
I have a couple, yeah.
A couple?
Yeah.
Wow, that's incredible. I don't think I know anybody that's a mortician.
Rue and Becky Payette, the Workos, and Dan Davenport.
Wow, first and last names on air, huh?
What can I say? I love them all.
You're just not shy about it.
No. They know who they are, and they're all wonderful.
They know who they are. Words are hard today, man. They know who they are. They also know that this probably isn't the best way to extract blood from a corpse or somebody in general. What you do is you put this drill into the corpse's head, which causes the blood to just shoot out, and then you attach, what is it, like a rubber tube?
And a copper tube to a needle.
Yeah, and that's how you inject the corpse's blood into yourself so you can get immunity from this fungus.
This was very special. If I'm not mistaken, a monster shows up pretty much immediately after this scene is completed, so we have to to hide and get away from them. I was really confused about the syringe because I think I might have missed the note with the vaccine. So I just like stuck this thing in the head of the guy, and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing, but okay. Anyhow, after the monster passes, you wait for the coast to be clear, and then you can go back to the cistern. What is this part? Yeah. So at this point, because of the immunity that we have developed, and because of all the other work we've done, the hallway is no longer flooded, and that can allow us to enter the sewer, if I'm not mistaken. That's what's next.
Yep, you're exactly right. And it's exactly what you would expect when you think about a sewer level. There's a monster that's torn in twain down here, and Alexander will scold you when you pick it up, saying that you're taking the shadow with you. So that's bad. And then, of course, monsters do come down here. This is also where we learn, for the first time, we had heard in previous notes and flashbacks that Alexander wants to perform some sort of ritual to get the monster, the shadow, away from them. We now learn that this ritual is murdering somebody, and Alexander wants Daniel to do it because that'll throw off the shadow somehow. And Daniel kind of reluctantly agrees because he's thinking, I don't have a choice. I might die if I don't do this. And Alexander is saying that these people that we're murdering are evil and they're prisoners, they're thieves and rapists and things like that. So this is the first instance where we learn that Daniel is taking part in these acts and murdering people. At first, very reluctantly.
Yeah, no, it's a little bit unsettling to learn that this is what Daniel had been exposed to. But to be honest, at this point, I had started to think, is this related to the amnesia? And from a personal standpoint, I think one could say, yeah, probably. I liked the fact that you had to find a pipe to actually stop that spinning wheel to get out of the sewer. I love that kind of stuff. I love MacGyvering. So that's how we have to duck and we have to get through. There are monsters down there. They are called brutes. Not the ones that are bigger than grunts are brutes, for the record.
That's it.
They are scarier, I would say. But you have to make your way through the gate. You keep going through the sewer for a while. And just like in the archive tunnels, you need to scoot. You need to kind of get through this section.
Yeah. Further down, we find we've learned the name Agrippa before, and soon enough, we actually find him. Mm-hmm. We heard through a flashback Agrippa asking Alexander, I'm not going to be able to walk again after this, and Alexander is saying like, no, you'll be fine, you'll be alive, and Agrippa is like, that didn't answer my question. But we find Agrippa. He is this old guy who's been chained up. He's sort of hanging from chains from the ceiling, just dangling just above the ground. He's dead, sort of, but he can communicate with you telepathically, and he's weirdly chipper.
Yes.
It was weird. It was odd how chipper this guy was. His jaw, his lower jaw has been kind of removed, and he doesn't have a tongue. So he's communicating with you telepathically. Alexander sort of chained his soul to his body, what he refers to as the dead husk. I know for sure I missed something. How did Alexander do this? Do you know?
I do not actually know.
I think it's related to the extracting of Vita from people, but I'm not. This is admittedly, folks that are listening, this section was just a touch rushed on my playthrough, so I am missing a bit of the lore here. I know that this has happened. I'm not super clear on why,
and that's okay. This area where we have found Agrippa is known as the Nave, and for those who are, feeling like that sounds like a churchy word, well, get ready for a lot more of them. Because there are a lot of places coming up that will use other sorts of churchy words. But Agrippa wants your help. ultimately. He needs a tonic created. And I've got to ask, did you try to help him out, Rick, or no?
Yeah, I did.
I almost did, and we can cross that bridge in a moment. But
yeah, that plays into one of the 3 endings that you can get. Agrippa, if you hang out long enough, Agrippa kind of gives you different quotes and backstories and such. At first, Agrippa is like, "Don't worry, Alexander is totally toothless if he doesn't have an orb." And then he's like, "Oh, he's got an orb? That's not good."
I liked Agrippa. He was funny.
He was. He also tells you where to find the 6 pieces of another orb that you're going to use. Some are in the choir room. The others are in... Oh, what's the word?
That's the transept, isn't it?
Transept, yes.
Or is it the chancel? No, it's the transept.
We get another instance of Alexander speaking to us directly here before we get to the transept. Alexander is saying, "You've gone too far, my friend. I have to stop you." Or something to that effect.
Yeah, no, he does. What did you just leave us with about Alexander? What did he say?
Alexander, this is where he tells you that you've gone too far and then he's got to stop you.
Yeah, and we end up basically in his office at the top of the spiral staircase in the middle of the transept, which is kind of cool. And we find a string up there.
I liked the transept. It's got a bunch of ritual-esque drawings on the floor, cages hanging from the ceiling, and like you said, a big spiral staircase.
Yeah, no, it was very cool. There are 4 doors off of the transept, the one that you came through, and then 3 doors that go to different torture chambers. And there are pieces of the orb in each of the rooms, just to kind of, tie a bow on it, keep it kind of clean and lean for the time being. There are also, if you're trying to make the tonic for Old Agrippa, you can find some of those materials as well in this area. And this is all very medieval torture-y sorts of things that they were using to extract blood and vitae from these, eventually we learn, innocent people.
Yeah, this is all incredibly macabre. It's the devices range from the Iron Maiden to, just being hung by your shoulders and having those break to the one that probably scares me the most, the bronze bull. The idea of that one is just so incredibly terrifying. Not to mention, in each of these, we get sort of flashbacks as to how the victims felt. The one in the bronze bull didn't even know what was going on. And again, that goes back to, Ben, what you were saying. We eventually learn these people are innocent. But yeah, we're seeing all of these, and this is stuff that Daniel has had his hand in. So this is what Daniel has been doing.
Yeah, and Alexander has pipes that have been put into each of these torture chambers, leading into the cells for other prisoners, so that they can hear the screams and the torment coming from those who are being tortured. Those echoes of tumult are heard by the next round of victims.
His belief being that the more psychologically tortured the victims are, the more vitae we're getting. And this is where we get one of my favorite flashbacks in the game of Daniel sort of chanting to himself, "Paint the man, cut the line," as he is continuing murdering these people. This sort of represents the crux between Daniel being reluctant about taking part in this and then just taking part in it willingly. He's phrasing it in such a way that he's not murdering somebody, he's cutting a line, because he painted a line and he's just cutting a line. And his vocal performance here is just so riddled with the the trappings of insanity. He hasn't completely gone off yet, but he's so far gone from who he used to be. He's really turning into a monster here. It's tough to feel sympathy for him as we move forward in the story.
No, it's you kind of look and go, oh, I saw this kind of coming personally. I don't know about you, but I kind of felt that there was going to be some sort of undertone of guilt, but I don't know. This happens in the choir entrance because this is between, we've left the transept and we've gone through the other doors in the nave, and we go to the choir entrance, and then there's the choir main hall. Did the choir main hall spook you?
So the main hall, that's the one where it's completely black and just totally spacious, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no. It's worth mentioning too, but just before I answer your question, Ben, because I'm not going to just disregard it, which is something I have a tendency to do whenever I'm performing on mic, and I'm working on it. Okay.
Oh, you fine.
But that flashback of paint the line or paint the man, cut the line, that lowers your sanity by a lot, and it's purposefully done so because now you are in a completely dark room with monsters just wandering about, and you have to hide. So the effect is now your vision is completely wavering and warping, and it is doing all that it can to make this as stressful for you as possible. So to answer your question, yes, I love this segment, and I really liked what comes next.
This is one of those ones where I've read a lot of people who felt like too scared to even play through it, and that I didn't get that sense from this. But it was a cool room. The ambiance was really sick, actually. But there are more torture chambers with more orbs, and there are other tools that we can use to continue to try to make the tonic for Agrippa. What part that comes next that did you like?
Well, now that your sanity is at an all-time low, and you open a door, and as you round the corner, there is a horde of the grunt monsters that are just rushing at you. And this is a forced death. You can't escape this.
This is when we enter the chancel.
Yes, my bad. Yes.
No, it's all good. I was just going to say, I don't remember that happening there. No, it does happen. And inescapable.
Yeah, and it's, up until this point, we've seen at most maybe 2 monsters around. One will be in the distance. You've just got away from it, and then you round a corner, and then boom, there's another. Here, there's like 6. And as soon as you round the corner, they're already looking at you and rushing you. So you can't get away from this. They slash you to the ground, and then you get the sleep text on the screen. And when you come to, you are in a cell. There's a monster just watching you from the outside, and Alexander is talking to you. He is saying he can't believe you drank the amnesia mixture, but it makes sense because you didn't finish what you set out to do, which is, quote, saving him and stopping the shadow. So he says he'll give you one more chance, and he makes it a point to call you a friend. And this is actually where you can, I misspoke earlier. I said that there are 3 endings. This is a 4th ending you can get here. If you wait here long enough, the shadow actually does come, and you get a the end screen. So this is kind of like considered a secret bad ending.
How about that? Usually we're looking for secret good, but apparently if you just sit there, you get killed. Hey-o.
Yeah, and this is just another way that this game has influenced future games like the Stanley Parable, where if you just sit in the room, you get a secret ending.
I'm going to have to do that the next time. Yeah, so we have to work our way out of this, out of our cell that we're in. And if I'm not mistaken, that's we use that with the hammer and chisel to break. Yeah, hammer and chipper to get through, and we have to find a key to actually get out of the cells room. You can do this a number of ways. I did it through lowering the bucket into the well, because you find a bucket, etc. You lower it, get the water, and put it through the pipe. Rick, which I think you mentioned at the beginning of this. So you get the key, you get yourself out of the room, and then you can enter the laboratory that you wanted to, or that you couldn't earlier, which is where you can make the tonic for Agrippa, which I made it for him, and I gave it to him, and then he says to me, do you know what he says next?
Yeah, he asks you to cut his head off, which you do, and then you take it with you as an inventory item.
I couldn't find a saw, so I just left.
It's in the other room. One thing that I think we skipped over, there's another mad dash with a shadow chasing you, and you just have to run and run through the water. But more importantly, there's a playable flashback where it shows you walking towards a farmhouse to kidnap farmers' children. It's outright stated. It's outright stated, kill the parents. We only need the kids. So this is showing you just what kind of monster Daniel has become, and two, it's setting up the crux that caused Daniel to sort of break down and take the potion of amnesia.
Yeah, I mean, that was when that flashback happened, I was like, oh, like they really immerse you in the damning things that Daniel did.
And it actually it happens right after you do or do not cut Agrippa's head off. It happens in the chancel, where we learn about Daniel's turning point. He essentially tracked down, hunted, and murdered a little girl. And we find a page of Daniel's diary where he's like, I can't believe I've done this. It's sort of like his rock. That sounds almost disingenuous and cold-hearted, but it's sort of like his rock bottom where he finally is able to see himself clearly and realizes he's been murdering a lot of innocent people. He just murdered a child and killed her just so he could save himself. So he sort of has a breakdown after coming to terms with this, and this is why he drinks the potion.
Yeah. And I okay, so like the trope of having amnesia is one thing, but the potion really saves it. I thought that was really cool.
And that's why I think this works so well, is because it doesn't use it as a trope to just info dump on you, but two, like, of course he drank the potion after he, it would have gone one of two ways. He either would have continued and become Alexander or like him, or he could have done what he did and drank the potion. I mean, it's done so well, and it's so dark and vile. And I also really appreciate that, just because you are the protagonist, it does not mean that you are the good guy, because there are no good guys in this story.
No, and trope is the wrong word. That was a misspeak. I'm trying to find the word and it's escaping me. But
I thought trope was the right word. Did you mean like cliche?
I think I meant cliche. That's exactly what I meant. Of having amnesia.
Potato.
But the vehicle by which they present this cliche, I think, saves it tenfold. Yeah. I kind of felt bad for Daniel, like he was being manipulated, and then like this happened. I was like, yeah, Daniel, dude, I'm sorry, but like, come on.
Yeah, it's not without its reasons for you to have a modicum of empathy for Daniel, but Alexander does this sort of thing too towards the end, where he presents the whole like moral gray area, and it's like, maybe, but that does not excuse the actions that you've done. You're still a monster. Like, Daniel has been willingly killing innocent people, and he just tracked down and killed a kid. I mean, yeah, you were manipulated, but
nice try, Daniel.
Hard to come back from that.
It is. Off of the chancel, one of the rooms, I believe it's the room on the left, there's a machine, and after we wedge a stone into that machine, that's how we actually can open the gate to the inner sanctum, or at least stop the electric field that is protecting the inner sanctum, but we don't get to enter until we build the orb. The moment's finally here. We've picked up a jar of tar somewhere along the way, or a bucket of tar rather, and we place each piece of the orb into the pedestal, which it kept saying, I need to find a proper place to build the orb, and I was like, okay, I found how many tables? Just let me friggin' build the thing. Nope, it was the actual hemispherical depression on the top of the basically it's like a baptismal font. But after you put it together, you can cross the bridge and finally enter the inner sanctum.
And as you do that, this is probably the hardest the shadow chases you throughout the game. Like, the music is ramped, your screen is vibrating, you've got to go. I didn't even turn around to look to see what was going on behind me at this point. I was just like, I gotta go. Move forward. But yes, to get into the orb chamber where Alexander is, you have to make some blood offerings.
Classic.
Yeah, why not?
No, I mean like classic blood offering. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You got to make a couple
Just
of
did
them.
one yesterday.
And I like it too because like as you do it, it like makes you dizzy to the point where you're like falling over and your vision's impaired. That's pretty cool. But this will let you get into the room with Alexander, who is completely naked with his wing wang just
Just hanging there.
Yeah, he is. He's hanging with the best of them. And he's sort of levitating in the middle of the room. Like I mentioned before, he gives this sort of like "we aren't so different, you and I" kind of speech, and it's like
Kisses you.
yeah, this moral relativism. Get out of my face, man. You got to go. But you kind of get to choose which ending you get at this point. So what did you do, Ben? I asked you at the beginning. I mentioned at the beginning. I'm interested to hear what you did. So what did you do here?
I didn't cut off Agrippa's head because I couldn't find the saw. I would have had I found it, but instead, I'm in the inner sanctum. I'm in the orb chamber, and in my mementos is saw off Agrippa's head, and I was like, too late for that, pal. So I think I ended up getting the regular bad ending, if I'm not mistaken. Basically, Alexander opens the portal and goes back, or goes somewhere else in time. I think he goes back to his original home, which is what he's been trying to do the entire time. You were asking, like, I don't know why he's doing all these things. He's going back to his original dimension.
Yeah, so that's kind of the bad ending. Alexander will, get the ritual to summon a portal, like you said, Ben, to get back to his home. Alexander tells you can't go through the portal because you're tainted by the shadow. You're going to die either way. So if you just wait, it takes a long time for this ritual to complete. But he'll go through the portal, and the shadow just kind of consumes the whole room, and the end. You're dead. That's kind of the bad ending because you let Alexander get away with it, which sucks because like he deserves to die. How you can do that is you can knock over all of the pillars around the ritual. You can just push them over, and Alexander gets pissed. The shadow kills him, and you actually leave the castle as it's collapsing behind you. And you have this little monologue where you're like, I can't ever erase what I did, but I did my best to repent. I took care of Alexander. The only thing I can do at this point is just live. And I appreciate that. I appreciate them not painting him as a protagonist in the classic sense at this point because, like we said, Daniel is not a good guy, unfortunately, but he did take care of the root of the problem with Alexander. And then the final ending with Agrippa's head, as the portal opens. One thing Alexander will mention is that only one person can go through it, but he does mention that even if you go through it, you'll die. You can throw Agrippa's head into the portal, which is kind of funny. I actually don't really like this ending very much because you throw it in and Alexander says like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, you just killed us both. And that's what happened. The shadow does come in and get you both, but then you get this black screen with this like blue light that Daniel saw before what started this whole thing. And it's Agrippa talking, and he somehow gets wired to save you. He says, like, look at him, he deserves to live. And it's implied that you're saved somehow. I just don't get it.
The story's ripping off a Christmas Carol. That's what's going on here. He's a good old Ebenezer Scrooge being saved by the ghost, Marley.
I think the reason that I don't like this ending is just because like it's going to a length to paint Daniel into morally good, and like we've talked about this on the show before, where like morals don't work that way. Like as much bullshit as I think Alexander's like we aren't so different speech is, he does have a point because like morality isn't good or evil and nothing in between. And Daniel is not good. So having him be saved just because like you helped Agrippa and Agrippa is like, there's something good in that guy. It just, I don't know. It feels really cheap, kind of like a cop out.
And I think that's why I said that the ending kind of left me wanting more. I mean, even in the other two endings, I look at that and I go,
I suppose. I think the ending where you do escape the castle after killing Alexander and you make it a point to say, like, I'm never going to fully repent for what I've done, but I tried. I think that's good enough. I'm not saying that I don't agree with you, because the ending certainly wasn't as strong as the rest of the game. I'm thinking, how else could it have ended? And I'm not really sure, you know?
I'm not saying that I could think of anything better off the top of my head, but just knowing other games and what they've crafted and what they've been able to do, I look at that and go, there's something, and I don't know what it is. I don't want to say it's like just a dastardly twist or anything, but I don't know. I just kind of was like, oh, okay, he's been evil the whole time, and I'm gonna die. Or I like the fact that he walks away alive in the normal ending, and is received by Agrippa and the other, but like, it just, I'm a little hungry.
I'm with you. I think it's a good problem to have, right? We're kind of damning the ending with not even faint praise, with modest praise, because the rest of the game was so good. It was going to be tough for the ending to hold up to that no matter what, So, I mean, that's Amnesia. Like the ending, hate the ending, feel indifferent about the ending. It's got to end, and that's how it ends. And maybe it does get expanded upon in Justine or in A Machine for Pigs. I guess we'll have to play them to find out.
I most certainly will be playing both, because I don't know, I'm not going to knock something until I marinate in it.
That's one way to put it. That's for sure. I'm with you. I think this is a certified play.
Oh, you have to play. I mean, if you are into the horror genre, if you are into being scared, this is a must play. With my rating, I'm not saying that it's not worth playing, because it is a cornerstone, and you must. I mean, even if you're just a gamer in general, you know what I mean? It's a really brilliant and beautifully made first-person game. Come on.
This is a game that I think would genuinely does not need a reskin, like a remaster. But I think the only thing that would make this game, to me personally, scarier would be crisper graphics. Like, everything else the game does, I think it does so well, and it scared me plentifully. If it had crisper graphics where things looked more realistic, that's literally the only thing I could think of. Because the writing, fantastic. The ambiance and the atmosphere, fantastic.
I think crisper graphics, and I don't mean this in like a silly way, but a slightly wider variety of the impending enemies and the impending doom. That would have done something to me or for me.
I wonder if the subsequent Amnesia games did that and increased the number of enemies.
I'm excited to see.
I think I heard somewhere that spiders were originally going to be like a minor enemy in this game, but they scrapped it at the last minute or something.
There's spiders in the game.
Yeah, I don't know.
They're just on the wall when your sanity's low.
Yeah, they're kind of just hanging out like those like those little spiders in Miyazaki movies. You know what I'm talking about? The little black things?
Soot.
The soot, yes. But that's it. That's Amnesia.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen.
Certified spook game.
So, let's tell them where they can come and give us their hard opinions, shall we?
Yeah, you come outside and give me that opinion face to face. Throw hands.
Just come to our houses.
Yeah, my address is as follows.
We'll feed you supper.
The best way to reach us is probably via Instagram. If you search Pixel Project Radio, will come up. And we hope that you do, because we want to have more audience engagement. But the @ is Pixel Project Radio Podcast. That's where we exist on the Instagram.
If you want to write us an email where you can digitally slam your fists on the desk in front of us and either say, wow, that was great, or who do you think you are, you can reach us at pixelprojectradio@gmail.com. And
by the way, we will, if they're, appropriate to read on air, both in terms of content and, vulgarity, we'll read them on air if you email us. We would love to hear back from all of you, both in terms of emails and ratings. You can always give us a rating on Apple Podcasts or Podcast Addict, Those are the two places we'll probably see it. And please do. We will read all of those on air, even if they're 1 star, although don't do that. Don't do that. Only 5 star. Only 5 star. We're a 5-star podcast, and we don't accept any form of criticism.
No.
Obviously, that's not true, but please do rate if you feel so inclined. We have a Twitter. We don't use it that much, at Pixel Project Pod, but yeah, not super active.
And is that everything?
Oh, boy. Let's see. We gave the socials, call for reviews, the email, recipe for a good pumpkin pie. I think that's everything.
Yeah, if you play about at the 30-minute mark, if you start playing it backwards at about 80% speed of what the original speed is, you'll hear a pumpkin pie recipe that I'm presenting, and Rick will be scatting to the tune of giant steps.
Yeah, you all thought that I was just having a bad word day, and that's why I was tripping over my words, but no. It is because we are subliminally messaging you all.
Yeah, that's amnesia for you, folks.
That's amnesia, and the meowing and pawing of my cat at my leg must mean that the episode is done. So thank you all once again for tuning in. Please do consider giving us a rating and following us on our socials. And until next time, this has been Rick Firestone.
And Ben Bugale, and we hope you have a happy Halloween. Didn't know if you had anything else to say.
Oh, your cadence made it suggest that you were going to keep going. We will catch you next time, everybody.
Thanks so much.